the United States talking to terrorists? As the hopes and dreams of the Arab Spring grind into a long, violent summer, some countries are engulfed in revolution. Others are trying to pick up the pieces left behind by corrupt regimes. But who will emerge from the rubble? In Egypt, the U.S. is dealing with a sobering reality. The chance for democracy in Tahrir Square may lead to a more powerful Muslim Brotherhood and Sharia law. Today, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton confirmed the U.S. is in talks with the Muslim Brotherhood despite its ties to Hamas. Joining me now are Michael Scheuer, former senior CIA officer, and Phil Mudd, former CIA analyst and deputy director of counterterrorism. So let me begin, and Michael, let me ask you this question. Is the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization? Should we be talking to them? And should we more generally be talking to any organization that we deem to be a terrorist group?
Well, terrorism, of course, is in the eye of the beholder here. The Brotherhood hasn't conducted any operations in recent years, though it is fully capable of doing so. I think what we really see here is Mrs. Clinton in the White House realizing that what they saw in Tahrir Square had very little contact points with what's coming in reality. There's not going to be a democracy in Egypt. There's going to be some kind of a power-sharing arrangement between the Muslim Brotherhood and the army and other groups. But the one thing I think that's very important here is the Muslim Brotherhood is a very powerful organization across North Africa and into the Levant. And sooner or later, they're going to establish governments that we don't like any more than we liked Mubarak. And I don't know where America goes then, because we've made it very clear that we intend to teach them how to vote and how to treat women and how to run elections. So I think the big surprise of the Muslim Spring is there wasn't one.
Well, okay, look, I don't want to get into that debate. It's a little larger as an issue than I want to try to deal with right now. But Phil, let me come back to you. We certainly want to encourage democracy. Democracy sometimes produces results we don't like, such as Hamas in the Gaza Strip. In the case of Egypt right now, the Muslim Brotherhood is participating in a democratic process. They have a background that ties them to many terrorist organizations. In your view, should we be talking to them? Do we have any choice?
Absolutely. I think we should talk to them for a couple of reasons. First, you have a fairly narrow counterterrorism reason. Muslim Brotherhood and al-Qaeda hate each other. And as al-Qaeda goes on to decline, this is an opportunity to support a political group that I think will continue to deflate al-Qaeda. This is a public disagreement between them, nothing secret. So I think there's a narrow opportunity here with the Brotherhood to take some wind out of the sails of al-Qaeda. More broadly, I think you have to look at a little history and say, look, we spoke to people like the Filipino dictator years ago, Marcos. We talked to the Shah of Iran. We talked to Mubarak. Now we have people who support, at least now, the democratic process. What are we supposed to say? Recent reports show that we're in conversations with the Taliban, who will never win an election in Afghanistan, but we can't talk to the Muslim Brotherhood, both for counterterrorism reasons and for reasons of supporting the democratic process. I'm not sure we have much choice.
Michael, let me come back to you on that point, because I think the Taliban situation, where it has been articulated very clearly by the U.S. government that we want to enter into a negotiation with them. There's a report in the FT, the Financial Times today, that details the number of meetings we have been having with them. There is a case where there is no democratic process, but we are still negotiating with the terrorist organization. Do you think that is wise policy, or should we simply have an absolute rule we won't deal with organizations that we deem to be terrorists?
No, I don't think we should have a hard and fast rule on anything, really. I think you have to take the world as it comes. We're talking to the Taliban because the president and the Republicans have decided to surrender there, and we're looking for a way out without getting embarrassed, and the Taliban will control that. So I think that's just another signal of our defeat in Afghanistan. As far as the Brotherhood goes, we can talk to them all we want, but Mrs. Clinton laid out very clearly what she wanted from them in terms of their behavior politically and socially, and none of that's going to happen. They're also not going to forget that for 40 years or more, we supported Mubarak, who spent most of his time carving up, imprisoning, persecuting, and torturing the Muslim Brotherhood. So we have a long road to go before we get much traction with any of these groups, but ignoring them is not the answer.
So it sounds to me that despite that both of you are saying that pragmatism rather than an absolute rule needs to govern, that we have no choice to talk to the Muslim, but to talk to the Muslim Brotherhood, who are participating in a democratic process. And in fact, you've said the Taliban, similarly, we don't really have a whole lot of choice there either. So what has happened to the grand principle that terrorists are to be shunned, isolated, pushed back into the corner of international diplomacy where they sort of shrivel up and die on their own. Phil, have we given up on that sort of larger theoretical point?
No, I don't think so. If you look at the just announced White House strategy on counterterrorism, their continued focus on the people who kill Americans. That's people like al-Qaeda. As Mike suggested, we have Muslim Brotherhood that has deep divides with al-Qaeda. In fact, al-Qaeda, some of its leadership came out of Egypt, and they disagree openly with the Brotherhood. So we're not talking about talking to terrorists here. We're talking about a political process that's going to include Islamists. Let me add one more point here. We in this country look overseas and think that other people believe the same things we do, including about the democratic process. This is not correct. For example, we believe in the separation of church and state. You look across the Islamic world, polling data will show you the vast majority of Muslims in countries like Egypt, I believe the figure is 90% for Egypt, believe that religion should play a major role in government. So it's not just a narrow, pragmatic perspective we have. There's an idealistic perspective as well. It has to do with American values. When people win elections, after we've spoken to autocrats for decades, should we not consider speaking to people who then win elections? I think we should.
Michael, do you agree with that? Do you think that the mere fact that they win an election should be a sufficient basis for our beginning the negotiation with them? Israel is not negotiating, and I think properly, with Hamas. Hamas won an election. The legitimacy of the election is open to doubt, perhaps, but Hamas won that election in Gaza. Should Israel continue to refuse to negotiate with Hamas?
Israel should do whatever it needs to do to defend itself, as far as I'm concerned, but I don't think we need to be supporting the Israelis in anything. Certainly, if we cared about what the Israelis thought or about their security, we would not have stabbed Mubarak in the back and brought him down, because whatever happens in Egypt now, the government that takes the place of Mubarak is going to be very anti-Israeli. And I think the one thing about the Brotherhood, what the Brotherhood is not in this for democracy or for anything else at the end of the day but power. That's what they're after. And if it takes some democratic talk and it takes a little peacefulness at the initial stages, then that's what they'll do. But at the end of the day, they want to be the government of Egypt. And that has to be the American, I think, optic here. We're going to have to deal with an Islamist government in Egypt that's going to be decidedly unfriendly to the Israelis, very reluctant to take advice from the Americans. And if we pull our aid, the Saudis will step in. The Saudis probably have already stepped in with the Brotherhood to supply money.
Michael, I hate to cut you off, but time goes short. The only thing I would add to that before the clock runs is I think there certainly is a school of thought that agrees entirely with you about the Muslim Brotherhood. There's another school that they actually have changed fundamentally. Only time will tell. I guess hoping for the best is not much to rest upon. All right, Michael Shore, Phil Mudd, thanks for being here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.